My name is Mike Smith. I'm with the Truth FM radio network. And today I'm going to be talking about secure remotes. And it's kind of a broad term. So to take the theme of defining our terms, right, we're going to start digging into this into some detail. Normally, I have this disclaimer up here saying that anything I say you can't hold against me. If you actually try to do something with it and it blows up in your face, it's not my fault. I'm actually going to toss that slide completely because unlike my last talk last year, I'm going to give you very specific examples, very specific instructions. And my goal in this talk is by the end of it, even if you really aren't that technical, you're going to understand that there isn't a lot to actually accomplishing this, and it's something that you can in fact do yourself. Okay, so that's our big goal here. So what's the roadmap for today? We're going to talk about what I mean when I say remote access. I'm going to bring into play a slide from last year. If you were at last year's talk, I gave a talk on general security, and one of the concepts is layering. Okay, and that concept actually plays into this a great deal. And that's actually going to bring up the terms perimeters and VPNs and all these other things. So I'm going to take a little bit of time, just a little bit of time, and again, define these terms so that we're all clear on what we're talking about. And I'm going to apply the principles from last year to doing secure remotes. And, kind of foreshadowing here, what I mean by that is secure remote access to your studio, secure access between the studio and the tower, doing secure remotes at a football game or some event where you take your kid out there and you are live or semi-live from some kind of a thing in the community. I'm going to give you some hard examples at the end of this, and hopefully, Lord willing, this will come together very nicely. So let's define the problem first. All right, so on the surface, we start talking about remote access, and the first thing that comes to our mind is, I want to get to my stuff, right? I'm not where my stuff is, and I want to get there. But what we really mean, and are implying when we say that, is I want to get to my stuff, but I don't want anybody else to get to my stuff, right? I just want me to get to my stuff. And there's some formal definitions for remote access. I threw up a couple here from NIST, and really the one that comes into play is at the bottom there. It says access by users communicating external, right, outside of the studio in our case, outside of a security perimeter, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to securely connect to, talk with, and use things that are inside our security perimeter. So what on earth is a security perimeter? Okay, so security principles in general are best applied in layers, right? It's called in the industry defense in depth, right? So you've got your outer wall, or actually you have the moat of the castle, and you have your outer wall, you have all of these sort of concentric defenses that somebody has to hurdle to get to your stuff, right? And it's exactly, if you think of an onion, right? Of course, security makes everybody cry, so does an onion, right? So, you're peeling the onion, and you've got all of these layers, right? So we wrap the parts that we're trying to protect, and we only permit a small group of people to access those pieces, whether it's the automation system, whether it's the controls for the Omnia or the Nautel transmitter, if you're so backward as to use a solid state transmitter. I mean, come on. Anyway, there's an inverse principle there. And by the way, I am going, since they've conveniently sat together, I can hurl all my inserts or all my insults and nastiness this way. So you guys from Pennsylvania may want to duck. Anyway, so there's an inverse principle, right? You want to keep everyone else out. The more people that you allow in, the greater your risk that somebody is going to mess up, you're going to get compromised. So what does our security perimeter look like in real life? Okay, so there's two aspects to this. There's a physical aspect and there's a logical aspect. Okay, so the physical aspect is what I hope you all have done, and that is you have placed your studio somewhere other than the lobby in your church. Right? You've got a room with a door and it's locked, most of the time, okay? The logical aspect of this is the studio, not just being behind a door, should really be on its own network. The radio station should be on its own separate network. Now, it doesn't mean you need to have a separate internet connection. I talked about this a little bit last time, and we're going to review some of that. But it should be separate. So we've got physical and we've got logical separation, okay? And I'm going to reuse the same example that I did last year. WOGS 107.9, it does not exist, okay? And I made this up entirely so that we can make fun of them and nobody will get offended. But the situation we have with WOGS is the studio is in a room or something, some part of the building at a parent church. The transmitter is remote. Audio is sent from the studio to the transmitter via the internet, using an IP studio to transmitter link, STL, all right? You've got limited staff or just all volunteers. And when you do things out in the community live remotes, right, you're actually doing it from football games or, different community events, races, what have you, all right? So this is the scenario that we're trying to set up. So now let's take a look at their setup. Again, diagram from last year. This actually shows, a setup with many of the components we all know and love. We have some board, microphones. Bill is the only person on the planet that still loves and plays CDs. You have your on-air automation system, a production system, a streaming PC, audio processing. Your EAS goes to a codec, across the internet to another codec, and out your transmitter. Okay, so that's a really pared down sort of classic view of a smaller station. So now, let's apply the idea of that security onion, right, and a perimeter. So now we have introduced the fact that it should be right behind a locked door. There is the physical perimeter that I was just discussing. And we have also added here a router. And last year I mentioned that you can actually get a cheap router at Best Buy, and as long as NAT is turned on and you actually connect it the right direction, you can achieve some very basic separation between the station and the rest of the church. Okay, so you've created the logical perimeter in addition to the physical. All right. Now, one note that I made last year that I want to stress again, that a router that you bought from Best Buy that has NAT, Network Address Translation, turned on, is not the same thing as a firewall. It is not the same thing as a real remote access solution, right, that we're going to be talking about, okay? They're different. It just serves a purpose in this case, right, to create a basic perimeter. All right, so now, commonly, how do we all do this, right? When we're trying to get the job done, we don't want to be sitting in the studio all the time. This is how this works. So your classic go-to My PC, TeamViewer, whatever, okay? It requires a PC or a Mac, in the studio to be able to remotely access into. Your email address is typically what you have signed up with, which is super easy for someone like me to guess because you've posted your email address all over social media because you want people to talk to you, okay? You have reused the same nasty, stupid, simple little password that you have used everywhere else that is like 1234, okay? People do this, right? I went on and on, last year about this for quite a while, and this is like, anyway. A lot of these products say we use, and I'm not going to go native on you, just XYZ encryption, and it sounds really good and really, top-notch, cutting-edge of technology, but that's pretty much irrelevant because your email address is super easy to guess, and that really lame password that you like using is the same lame password that you're using everywhere else. Some products create a partner ID, other codes that you use that you're going to write down on a piece of paper or email to yourself to be able to get back in. Same idea, never write these things down, right? This is why you make your password a phrase or something that you can remember to keep it complex, so you never write it down. Performance stinks for just about all of these products. If you've ever tried to use one when everybody else is trying to use it after work hours, the performance is absolutely terrible. And they claim compatibility with all kinds of different programs. You can, copy and paste files, move things back and forth. But again, any of you that have used these for any amount of time will know, mostly true, often not, pretty frustrating. Now, this is the standard way of doing it, and it's not great, but it can actually get a whole lot worse, okay? And this is another thing that folks will do, and I went on and on about this last year too, and that is called port forwarding, right? I look in the manual, I figure out what port my particular doodad, let's just say our Omnia audio processor, is using for its interface. And then I go ahead and I am clever and I put a little rule in my router on some port that I don't think anybody's ever going to guess because it's totally different than the published one, right? And I still have a really junky password, 1234 on the device, and I wonder why the thing goes down or somebody owns me almost immediately, okay? This right here, if you are doing this, I'm not trying to shame anybody, but I cannot emphasize how often this is the way that the bad guys will get into an organization. If you all remember in the news a few years ago, the water plant in Florida, where they just in the nick of time caught it before they put all the chemicals in the water supply. You remember that? That was TeamViewer and a really junky password and a port forward, right? Your government dollars at work, right? This is an extremely bad idea. Vendors of, little toaster equipment that you're used to using, just your audio processor, your router, your whatever, there's not a lot of room or effort put into making the device secure in the first place. It's got some basic stuff. You can log into it. It may let you have individual users, but they are extremely easy to abuse. So if you are doing this, even if you want to, completely disregard everything, I share later in this presentation, you need to stop doing this. You need to stop doing this, for real. All right, now, so GoToMyPC, TeamViewer, not great. This is just absolutely awful. So I'm going to propose a better way to do this, okay? Now, again, let me emphasize, the non-technical folks in the room are going to then immediately want to tune out, okay? I want to encourage you not to do that for one reason, because my goal here is I want to show you today some very direct, easy, practical things that you yourself can do, right? You don't need another engineer, you don't need to call and pay somebody to do these things, right? So I'm going to give you some very practical tips, so don't tune out, all right? A better way to do this, right? A better way to tackle this problem is using a VPN, a virtual private network. That's what a VPN stands for. So a VPN lets you extend your network, that perimeter that we talked about, like the studio network or some other network, or like your church network, right? All of these things, by the way, for the pastors in the room that I'm saying, you can do this for your radio station. If you have things you want to be able to get to at your church remotely, you can do the same thing, right? The same rules apply. So a VPN lets you extend your network perimeter to another location, all right, across a hostile network. I think we would all agree the internet's a very hostile network. It uses, hopefully, some strong authentication to verify endpoints. And that's actually really important. I'm going to drill into that in a minute. And hopefully strong encryption to hide the traffic going from you or the one location to the other. So that's what a virtual private network is, okay? So now, there's a number of types of different VPNs. You have all seen the ads on the internet, I'm sure. You're surfing around and, NordVPN or Proton VPN or ExpressVPN, Surfshark, whatever. There are literally hundreds of them. Will start telling you, hey, we've got a way for you to access restricted content that you can't normally get to, like in another country. We can provide you anonymity, right? That's another big selling point. And of course, we all know if you have to be wanting to do something anonymously, you really need to ask some good questions as to why you're doing that, right? I will say, and I want to emphasize this, I've got that little sarcastic thing at the end, well, not really, on the end of anonymity. If you don't know this, your browser, even though you have gone to great expense to buy, antivirus, anti-malware, I've configured it, to this way and that way, browser fingerprinting, right? Ask me about this offline, is incredibly effective. This is how, even though you have gone to all these measures to kind of hide, not really who you are per se, but just keep them from marketing to you, but yet they still manage to figure out what you like and what you do. That's all based on browser fingerprinting. So even though you've paid for the VPN and you're secretly going from A to B, B can still tell from the fingerprinting on the other end who you are and what you're doing, right? So that's why I have that not really there. They're commonly used for bypassing censorship, in certain countries. People want to get to freedom-loving content. For example, people are VPNing out of New Jersey all the time, to the south, right? Because they need, actual information. What's that?
Making big money.
And making big money doing that, right? These things are also touted to give you, privacy, right, and security, because there's encryption in the connection, and it's going to prevent people from eavesdropping on what you're doing. Well, again, not really, okay? And in this case, think about this. So you have company A that you've just signed up for the VPN with, right? So you fire up the software, you connect to company A, and from company A, the connection goes to whatever you're trying to get to. So all your stuff is going through company A. And then you have to start asking yourself, why can they offer me this for only like $6 a month, right? Because company A, if you actually look in the terms of service, says that, oh yeah, we're allowed to watch exactly what you're doing, we're allowed to capture it, catalog it, tag you, and sell it. That's exactly what these companies are doing. So that's kind of why the whole privacy and security thing with these companies is, well, questionable. So that's one kind of VPN, and that is not the kind of VPN that I'm about to describe to you. Okay, I've just told you about this because what we're talking about is actually something that is distinctly different. So what is it? So what we are discussing is a dedicated solution that you control. All of the pieces you own, all of the pieces you control, you configure, and this is where people in the room start to check out saying, I can't do this, right? I have guys for this. I can't do this, right? I bet you can. And I bet you by the end of the talk, you're going to realize that you in fact can do this quite easily yourself. So here we have the WOGS, studio network such as it is, and I've drawn in a firewall here. And we've got a remote access tunnel from somewhere on the internet going to that firewall. This kind of a solution or a scenario supports working remotely, right? It supports talking between your studio and your tower site directly, which your engineer, by the way, will love, because when he comes in the 15th time that week to fix your Windows automation system, he can also get to your other stuff at the tower site, right, without having to stand on his head to do it, okay? It's a matter of convenience. But it also supports remotes, okay? And that's really where we're headed with this talk. All right, so the benefits to doing it this way, okay? So we're going to talk about setting up your own VPN. We set it up. Sharing files is trivial, right? So file sharing mechanisms just work. Accessing your Mac, via whatever sharing mechanism is your favorite, because there are several that Mac support. RDP or remote desktop on Windows, whatever, You can use all of the special client software that you got, so that Omnia control software, or if you have a really old Nautel transmitter as an example, the AUI software will work over something like this without a single bit of hassle, right? You can also forward audio, and that works very nicely if you use something like a No Machine. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of No Machine, but you can install it on Linux, Windows, and Mac machines, and not only does it forward the screen and let you share files, but you can also ship the audio from A to B, and you add a USB microphone and a little EQing, and boom, Bob's your uncle, right? You're recording spots and doing things for your station wherever you are, right? So, it's not just for working remotely. As I said, it's for connecting the studio and the tower together. And you can do remotes from events this way. And there's actually some very special advantages you get when you're doing remotes from somewhere. And so for the visual learners, right, in the room, this is what I'm talking about, is either we have two firewalls talking to each other, or we have a firewall back at our studio and we're connecting to it from the coffee shop, the event, or whatever it is we're doing. Okay, so this is what we're talking about here. Now, this all sounds great, right? And what do you really have to do to actually make something like this happen? Okay, and I want to encourage you again, you can do this, and I'm about to prove it to you. Okay, it's actually not that hard. And since every pastor that you're going to go talk to about this, right, after seeing my talk, is going to want to immediately know how much this costs, right, senior pastors? Like, you're going to get half your sentence out and how much, right? So let's take a look at that. Here is a great example. So here's a particular piece of hardware, and we'll see why in a minute that I've picked this. This happens to be a 4-port firewall, very good performance, and it's $349, okay, one-time cost. Now, go to my PC, depending on the deal you have, right? $33 a month per person, that's $396 a year. So doing this once, you've already removed that, you've already got back that recurring cost, and every year out, you no longer have that recurring cost. And this is just one example here, right? Same thing goes for TeamViewer, right? Depending on the packages you have and how it's set up, anywhere between $288 to $600 a year per person. So again, the math is actually quite simple, right? So there's your fiscal argument to take back to your pastor and say, this is why we can afford this. So now, let's take a look at the technology. What do I need to do this? Okay. At the heart of every VPN, to get the job done, it uses a protocol. And I'm only bringing these up to you because as you kind of walk through this and look at this, you're going to run across these. Okay, you don't need to memorize this, you don't need to know this to get the job done, but the name should click, all right, when you start looking around. So one of the popular ones, well, less popular these days, is IPsec. Came out of the 70s. You can see the origins that I put up there. It is a tremendous pain to configure and get working properly. Back in the day when I was assigned to set up an IPsec tunnel at an older job I had, my heart would sink because I knew it was going to be a week's worth of work because the other guy at the other end and me would have to sit there and suffer working out all of these little details. It's just not user-friendly. If you have a router that's natting at your church, it breaks, and you have to do all kinds of things to make that work. There's OpenVPN that originated in the early 2000s. It uses digital certificates to authenticate each end. Again, I'm going to come back to that point. That's very important. It supports multi-factor authentication natively in English. Multi-factor authentication is when there's something you know, something you have, something you are. Okay, so I know the password, I have a certificate, or I have an app on my phone that has the code that's changing, right? There's more than one factor that you need to connect, Okay, that's what multi-factor means. WireGuard is relatively new and will become totally obvious. I'm not a big fan, and I'll explain why in a minute. However, it performs really well. So here's some things to consider. As I said, IPsec, it's older, it's slow, doesn't work through NAT. It's a trial to set up. OpenVPN, the underlying protocols have some higher overhead, so your performance is not going to be as good, right? WireGuard is 3 or 4 times faster than OpenVPN. Easy, okay? However, it doesn't support multi-factor authentication, okay? Meaning, if you have a laptop and you set up WireGuard, normally you just click and you connect. No muss, no fuss, no password or whatever. There's a pre-shared key. That same laptop you have taken to Starbucks and you didn't watch yourself, and while you were getting your double whatever, it walked. So whoever has your laptop and has guessed the 1234 password to get into it now has access to your network. That is why it is important to have multi-factor authentication. A password and something you have like a certificate, okay? Now, here's my recommendation. If you ignore everything else in the presentation, but you're looking at a solution, a VPN solution, I would actually suggest using OpenVPN, because even though the performance is not as great, the benefits from the multi-factor authentication and the other security features that you get way outweigh that. And it also uses protocols that easily pass through other firewalls, and it works. For everything everybody in the room is doing, because I know there was some chatter on the mailing list about, well, I'm using 10 gig, blah, 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 right? This is radio. Audio is just not that heavy a lift. Okay, so anything that you're going to do in a remote or connecting to your studio or whatever, OpenVPN is more than adequate for your needs. So this is great. That's just a protocol. Not only can you use something like OpenVPN, and this is again for all the pastors in the room, you don't have to spend any money on software. Okay, and I've just thrown up some common names. These are all common free firewalls that people will use. You'll run into these names. Now, I'm going to cut right to the chase here to save on time. I'm going to recommend that you check out pfSense, okay? And there's a reason, because pfSense actually is not only supported by a commercial company, but there's a free version and it's reviewed. People are actually looking at the code, trying to break it, things are addressed, it's actively maintained. So on your spectrum of risk, it's actually pretty low. And you can't argue with free. And by the way, I will mention right now that I have some USB drives where I've already put a bootable image of pfSense on them. If you want to just reimburse me for the cost of the USB drive, and it's actually a really nice drive too. It's a 64 gig with a USB-C and a USB-A on it. Anyway, you can put it into an old PC. You can put it into, those little hockey puck PCs that are really popular on Amazon. Boot it up. And away you go, and you can try it without having to download the image, burn the image, and all the tech guy stuff. All right, so I have a few of those if any of you are interested. So I'm going to recommend that you check out pfSense, and the reason is it is super easy. So I've taken a snapshot here of my firewall at my house, and yours is going to look a lot less complicated than this because I have 16 different VLANs for various reasons set up, and it's just a very complicated setup because I help a lot of other stations and a lot of other people do things. But the GUI, the interface, is super easy. In fact, I brought one here, and I'm going to extend the offer just to prove the ABC of setting one up and playing around with it is so easy. I'm going to actually offer that I will connect this to my laptop either in the next break or sometime over the next few days if you want to try it out yourself, right? Just so that you can see how incredibly easy it is, all right? I'll also take this chance to mention that in the brown box here is a Protectly firewall with pfSense already installed. And there is a clear bucket, which I forgot to bring in here. If you will write down your name and the station you're from and put a slip into the clear bucket, we'll, I guess, put a post-it note or label it. I'm going to give that away free at the end of the conference. So on the last day, just put your name in the hat and we'll mix it around, we'll draw for it, and it is all yours, free of charge, okay? Now, for those of you that love using your phones, here is the hardware and the software, right? So a direct link to that particular 4-porter off of Amazon that I just mentioned, okay? And a link to the pfSense software where you can download the site, or download from their site free. You will have to register, or you can just email me and I'll give you the image so you don't have to register and give them all of your information. They still make it publicly available, but you have to work for your supper to get there. So all that being said, is this really going to be easy? Like, I'm already kind of glazing over. We got hardware, we got plugs, we've got stuff. I'm breaking out in the sweat, right? These 2 QR codes here go to links that you're going to love, okay? The first one is a QR code right under the firewall. Will take you to the Protectly site where they give you step-by-step instructions on how to install pfSense on their hardware. Pictures, English that it is so incredibly slick. Literally anybody in this room could do it because you're just checking it off. It's going to look like this, go do that. It's going to look like that, go do that. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have all kinds of extra dongles or hardware or whatever else, okay? It is literally a piece of cake. The other QR code is for part of the pfSense site that I'm going to be referring to in a minute that has all of their recipes. And it's literally a recipe. So you say, I want this place to talk to this place, or I want this laptop to be able to talk to my studio. They have step-by-step instructions that anybody can do, and I mean literally anybody. Point by point, nice pictures. All right, so I want to encourage you to check those links out. So now, here we go. Why is that lagging? Okay, so let's start actually looking at some real life scenarios, okay? So let's bring all of this stuff together. You know, the firewall in the diagram, we're going to assume is one of those Protectly devices off of Amazon or some other little hockey puck PC or some PC that happens to have 2 network cards in it, whatever. Okay, so that's what these firewall symbols are here. We can see we have our studio over here. And we have a bunch of remote users, okay? So this is our first scenario. So you buy it, you put pfSense on it step by step, and then you go to these recipes that I've got listed on the slide right here. Go in that order, okay, that I have shown right here, and you are set up. You can use the defaults for just about everything. You don't have to understand a lot of the deep protocol things or key sizes. A lot of it is pre-configured so that you don't have to do all that heavy lifting. It's just click, 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 and away you go. All right? And by the way, the clients for OpenVPN are available on just about every platform on the planet. I have the 2 web addresses there for Macs. You can use TunnelBlick. For Windows and other various unsavory operating systems, you can use OpenVPN directly. If you're a Linux user, you're not going to need to hear anything I'm saying, and you already know how to install it from the command line anyway. So this is, you know, our primary scenario. And by the way, here's a pro tip, and this is the thing that messes everybody up, okay? They set it up. It's 99.9% correct, but it still doesn't work. You'll notice that I have this 3rd number here, this 3rd octet, bold, right? And you'll notice that over here in the studio, it's different than the ones in the clients over here. If you don't do that, you're actually trying to do something that's called a bridging VPN, which is very complicated. People like me don't even like to do it, and you just don't want to go there. That's the only gotcha. And there's your freebie for the day. And you're going to notice in the rest of these diagrams, by the way, that I've done that very same thing. So our transmitter site, that one part of the address is different than our studio, okay? So again, right, here we go. We have an OpenVPN site-to-site configuration, and we've got the studio on one side. Actually, for you, I guess it'll be, well, anyway. We've got the studio on one side, and we've got the transmitter side on the other side, and I cannot tell you how nice it is when you are sitting in a studio or a transmitter site to be able to get to any of your other stuff from where you are, because you're fixing something, or you fixed this and then something else over here broke, right? I cannot emphasize how handy this is, okay? This is a big win. But now, this particular setup is really useful in another way, because a remote is really just a site-to-site tunnel where the one site just moves around, okay? That's really all it is at the end of the day. And so in this particular case, you can set up a site-to-site tunnel. I'm about to show you a practical example here. You've got a firewall on one end, a firewall on the other end. It just phones home, okay? And the nice thing, okay, Quip calls it the football, and I'm about to open this up and show you this here in a second. It's got a firewall in it, a little Protectly firewall. It's got a Comrex. It's got a power strip. It's got room for other cables and doodads in the case. So you take this and your laptop and your board and whatever else, and away you go. And in this particular setup, using the recipes that I've shown you, it can connect to a local wireless network at whatever venue you're in. You can hardwire in directly. It has ports where you can plug in your laptop. So not only is your audio getting from A to B using the Comrex, but you can get into your automation system. So when it's time to break in with the live whatever, boop, there you go. You pause the automation system, do your thing, boop, and away you go again, okay? So that is, in a nutshell, how you do a secure remote. And I'm going to open this up right here, and I've gone off camera and driven everybody else crazy, but you can see that on something like this, it just doesn't take very much, right? You have a Comrex, a firewall, and a power strip. And that's really all you need other than a board and a laptop. And now you can connect securely from anywhere and manage all of your stuff. And so with that, I'll invite questions.
Hey, no, don't ask that question. Does the firewall get hot?
Yes, it does, especially in South Carolina,
I had to sit
where right
by
next
him
to the
entire
Nautel
time
transmitter.
and listen to him. Okay, Mike, it really is helpful. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know your brain, like, what? But that's really important. So, because most of us are not doing what he just said. Amen. So we just always trying to do security better. Questions? Questions for Mike later on when he's by himself. Because you don't want to say, what's the P and the V and the, yeah.
Real quick, have you seen Tailscale? It's like WireGuard.
I have.
I use that extensively to and from my house. Like right now I'm on Tailscale. I'm using our Wi-Fi here, but I'm in my house right now. And it's just it's super easy to set up. It has multi-factor authentication and all of that.
And the trick is all of that is stuff built on and around WireGuard underneath, right?
Yeah.
And so the distinction I was trying to make is You can, right, add multi-factor authentication, but then it becomes a layering and a complexity problem, right? Because you've got WireGuard underneath, and yeah, that actually hides some of that, from you when you
Yeah.
do the setup.
What's really interesting is I'm a federal employee and we have public Wi-Fi, but on our public Wi-Fi, if you want to attach your device to it, of course, everything is monitored, right? And they stop VPNs so you can't get to your house. But if you use Tailscale, they actually can't control it. It's
Yeah.
really strange.
There's
'cause
always a
it's
way
like-
around. Yeah.
It's really strange because it's,
There is always a way around, one way or another. But yeah, there is stuff you can layer on top of WireGuard. The distinction I'm making is that with OpenVPN, it's baked in.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a piece of cake to set up. And in fact, if you follow those links for those recipes, it will just do it for you. Literally, it will just crank it out and away you go.
We'll say that's on football. We've got everything set up the way Mike has just described. It is flawless. It works fantastic. And it's free.
Okay. So we're going to put the...
So there's USBs here
Yes.
that they need to pay you for.
Just for the USB. I'm not selling
yeah.
the software,
Oh.
just recover, because they're nice USBs, and I paid a good penny for them. So,
Okay.
yeah. I'm
Who's got a
charitable,
good
but,
penny?
this is a radio conference, so I got to stick it to you somehow. Right?
You got a question, Alan? Okay.
And you're asking probably the least technical guy in the room. So, okay, you've got that all in this little suitcase. What examples can you use that for? Can remoting into control your equipment, if I understand. But here's what I'm wondering. We do a remote broadcast using a Comrex. And one of the problems with it, it works wonderful, but more needs to be in a station to control the levels and all the things. And when the announcers want to throw things back, like for a break in a football action, she takes over and then breaks in with some promotion of some kind. Is there, we're all trying to find is a way to control things so that she could be at the game as well, and she wouldn't have to be stuck in the station.
Are
Would
you-
that kind of thing?
Well, let me ask you a question. Are you using a digital board, or is it analog?
No, it's an analog, isn't
It's
it?
an analog board? Okay.
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
It does. It's-
Just like Bill's cell phone.
Edison
right?
made it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Setting levels remotely with an analog board is something that, unless the board has servos and you've got some control software, it's just not going to happen. However, with a little practice, you can set your levels at a relatively safe place in advance and just manage it very carefully from the remote. The Comrex, and by the way, I don't know who made the comment about people don't know what a Comrex might be. It's actually a codec, which is Babel speak for, encoder, decoder. You stick audio in one end, it puts it into a format that'll go across the internet or a network and burps audio out on the other side. That's what a Comrex is in a nutshell. If you manage your audio levels, and this is, I'm not indicting you saying you don't, you're just all over the map. If you think about it ahead of time and you practice, you will discover that you can manage that effectively with an analog board just by setting things in one spot and leaving it. You can do all the things remotely. So if she's managing the automation system and doing other things, this is only one small part of that. If your kit includes like a small board with a couple of mics or whatever, you can have multiple people talking and doing things in a remote right there. You can have music. You can even have depending on your automation system, you can have a copy on your laptop. Right?
Right, there's the rub. Our automation system is not something that we used prior. we could do that. We could go live from any place, but what we have now, not capable.
The automation system just can't be paused, or it can't switch to a different input?
Can't switch.
Okay. That you would have to talk to an engineer to try to remedy.
There's one right in front.
But, I don't know of any automation system that cannot be at least paused, right? Even in a very basic sense. So using that remote desktop, whether via No Machine or RDP or whatever, you can press the pause button, right, at the end, or tell it to stop next. At the end of this cut, I'm going to stop and just wait until you tell me to go. Almost all of them do that. That's got to be in there somewhere. It's
It
just a
is.
matter of exposing it and practicing, right? You don't wait till the day of your event to figure all of this out, right? Yeah.
It does have inputs. Station Playlist has that ability, but you have to, I don't even know that. So we need somebody a little bit smarter, but that you can do that in Station Playlist.